Welcome back to my channel, everybody. Today I have two guests. I have my longtime friend, retired NCIS Special Agent Tom Coyle, and this is the third time he's my guest. And also I have a new person, retired security expert and FBI Cyber Special Agent Jerry Bessette. And today with my two guests, we'll talk about cybersecurity, how to keep your intellectual property secure, and what are the best ways to prevent attacks from the outside. Thank you both. Thank you guys for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Well, guys, before we get into the discussion, do you want to say anything to introduce yourselves and whatever you feel is relevant for about the background, your background in this field, whatever you feel is relevant for the discussion that we're going to have?
Go ahead, Jerry.
Yeah, sure. So Jerry Bessette, pleasure to be with you today, Leonardo. Really appreciate the invitation. I started off my professional career as a United States Marine Corps officer and then transitioned into the FBI as a special agent. I spent 24 years in the FBI as a special agent investigating a number of different criminal violations, and retired as a senior executive in the FBI Cyber Division, where I managed the FBI's cyber task forces and their technical operations program. From there, I retired 9 years ago, and I've been in the private sector for the past 9 years. I have managed hundreds of incident response breaches, negotiated against hackers, and have done that across a number of different business verticals for companies large and small. So unfortunately, I've seen the worst that can happen to a company, and the more people consider what they would do if they were in that situation, the better able they will be to respond, which is why it's important that we're discussing this today.
Beautiful.
Feel free.
I was an NCIS special agent for 21 years, and after that worked in the policy area of the National Insider Threat Task Force, and also working and the National Counterintelligence Executive as a cybersecurity, counterespionage SME, and served again for a year on the National Insider Threat Task Force, where I was the kind of the human factor expert, talking about what the adversary is looking for, how to take advantage of ignorant employees or naive employees or poorly trained employees. And so that human factor piece is a really good dovetail into what Jerry's area of expertise is. And so together, I think we constitute the both halves of this pretty complicated 21st century problem, I guess the best way to put it. So.
Absolutely. So I'm also an IT guy. I'm not a security expert, but I'm a project manager, so I know a little bit of everything. Okay. And so just to start, I would like to assess what kind of intellectual property are most at risk, because I think that there's a lot of confusion about this point.
Yeah, Jerry, will you take that?
Jerry, for some reasons, I can't hear you. You're mute.
There we go. So the reality is all intellectual property is at risk. I have seen, and we have seen in the United States, professional sports teams hacking other professional sports teams to get their playbooks. We have seen financial institutions being hacked for lists of customers and, financial account numbers. And then we've seen, pharmaceutical companies and manufacturing groups hacked for secret formulas and the processes that they use to efficiently produce things. So the reality is that all IP is at risk. No matter what industry you are in, there's someone that probably wants to target your IP.
Well, and that takes me to my next question, like who's trying to steal this? Because we usually tend to think of hackers, but you're also talking about competitors, and we might also have state-sponsored folks doing this for terrorism or war.
Yeah, it spans the gambit. So you do have nation-state hackers that Why spend millions of dollars and years of research to develop your own capabilities, whether it be fighter aircraft or missile systems, when you can just steal it from another country that's already developed it? You see hackers that are stealing stuff and trying to hold companies and organizations, extort them for money, hold them ransom basically for their information. But then you see two other different types of people. The first type is the individual that feels, hey, when I was at this company, I invented this stuff, so it's mine and I can take it with me when I leave. And for example, there was an individual that was a Google employee working on the Waymo self-driving car program. And when that individual went to go work for another company, he took a bunch of stuff with him that he developed. And so a lot of people feel that it's their right to take the stuff. And because of probably poor education on the human factor side that Tom talked about, they don't realize that they can't just take that stuff. They feel like, hey, I've been there for 5 or 10 years. I developed all of this, so it's mine. And unless they have that specifically written into contracts, which most companies won't do, it's not theirs. And then you have people that are just simply doing it for economic advantage. So any number of reasons that people would want to steal a company's IP.
Okay, so you blame it on ignorance mostly, because it should be written in the contract that when you produce something, it doesn't belong to you, but it belongs to the company. Shouldn't that be the case?
Yeah, most companies have that, have pretty strict employment agreements where that's written in. And so the employee is either unaware of it or they still kind of feel that it's their information. And I've had that even, I had a client within the past 12 months who had a very similar situation. And an employee worked for them for 10 years, developed a process, an engineering process to save them money, and took that information, attempted to take that information with him when he departed the organization. And the other thing you'll see is a lot of companies really don't have the desire to make a huge criminal prosecution out of this. So in many cases, they will, ask the company, the individual to return the information and maybe scan their personal devices as well as the company issued devices they had, and kind of serve them with a legal letter telling them they can't use any of the information they worked on. But a lot of companies don't want to be in the media for criminal prosecution of, former employees taking information.
Well, what are, in your opinion, you guys, the common mistakes that company make in protecting their intellectual property?
I cannot speak or will not speak to the technical piece of this, but there's a reluctance to invest all too often in the workforce. By that, I mean there's a reluctance to invest in the experts to come to the workforce or to the headquarters and brief the senior people and explain what's at risk if you don't conduct in-person live training of the workforce, not just, who to report something you see that's not good, but details about how to protect the IP and how to resist emails and how to make sure that your fellow employees remain motivated and empowered. And so if employees, it's all about the people. And if the people aren't excited to be there, and they don't feel a need that this is part of their company, their world, as opposed to, well, I just show up at 8 o'clock and I leave at 4:30, and I really don't care very much for the people I work with, but it pays great. And so there's a reluctance on the part of senior leaders to invest the time and money in finding the right people to provide this very significant training, very discreet training. There's just three handfuls of people that have the experience that Jerry does and I do. It's not countering the insider threat so much as it's the opposite end of that cup, which is training your workforce to understand what's at risk, training the workforce to appreciate how vulnerable they may be and what to do to mitigate that. So that's the piece that I talk about. And human nature is human nature. And a lot of CEOs will buy a liability insurance for their building, and they'll insist that all the employees that drive company cars have automobile insurance. And so that's for the unlikely event they get in a car accident. Well, this kind of service that I offer and Jerry offers are a proactive measure. And you're not going to read in the newspaper, as Jerry pointed out, about the dozens and dozens of companies every year that have to quietly make a employee who took stuff he or she wasn't entitled to, make that employee kind of go away. There's no benefit to putting this in the media. Indeed, it's a negative benefit for that company. So it's probably a problem a lot more deeply rooted than we may think. And Jerry could comment on that because he's been in the client space for some time. Jerry, do you want to take some of that?
Yeah, sure. From my perspective, Leonardo, first and foremost, companies need to understand what they're protecting. What is the IP that is specific to your company that if it was compromised could do, irreparable damage, potentially causing the company to go out of business or suffer huge financial losses. And then, kind of come up with a plan as to how you're going to protect that information. Tom mentioned training. Training is very important. You can do those micro web-based trainings for spear phishing and all the other types of cybersecurity things. But I think insider risk is very important training, and that's something that companies may want to do in person. I would recommend they actually do that in person. And then secondarily, if you don't have a program, well, one, understand it can happen to you, and you're going to need a insider risk program to protect your IP, along with all the other things companies need to do to protect, their resources and their network from a cybersecurity perspective. So if you don't have a program to do it, get a program. And if you do have a program, ensure the program is functioning as desired. And key to both of those things is investing in experts. Tom unfortunately suffered, a massive heart attack several years ago and spent a number of days in the hospital. And Tom, you didn't use the guy down the street to work on your heart, did you? Or did you invest in an expert?
I distinctly recall that circumstance, and I did not use my neighbor next door. I used the expert, Dr. Yunus, at the hospital in Manassas and Prince William, and he's a world-renowned cardiac expert. And thanks to him and my wife and family, I'm here today to talk about it. Jerry's point is simply that when you have valuable IP or a heart that needs attention and protection, you want to default to the best available person as opposed to a generic security guy on your staff or somebody you find in some other way, maybe LinkedIn. That's specifically not the way to find somebody, in my opinion. So, yeah, thanks for the heart-wrenching analogy. I like that.
But guys, so far about the human factor, you all only mentioned people trying to, I'm not saying steal here, but to take away the intellectual property of a company like in good faith because they think they're entitled to it. But isn't also this a weak link in the chain because humans can be fooled or convinced by external attackers to, like, for instance, give away their passwords or something like that?
Yeah, we've seen that. For example, Lockbit is a big ransomware group that was openly advertising several years ago for people to sell them their usernames and passwords so they could access a network. And then we also see what's known as the unwitting accomplice, people that don't realize they've been compromised and that their credentials are being used to do bad things, within a company. So, and then you even have, there was a situation a couple of years ago during COVID where, right after COVID kicked off, a company made a series of layoffs, reductions in force because they weren't obviously making money anymore due to the COVID pandemic. And people that were laid off, there was an individual that was laid off that was angry. And so he went in and stole a bunch of stuff from the company that made it even worse for them from a financial perspective. So you can
Very,
have any number of reasons.
can
Tom?
you could you talk about the educational culture in America and elsewhere? Increasingly, in my investigation, increasingly institutions, higher education and elementary and high school education, these businesses are being compromised with PII, and I think you and I've chatted previously about how ill prepared so many colleges and other schools, private and public, are in this whole protection of their valuable IP, which in this case is the students' names and addresses and emails and so forth.
Yeah, along with all the other different business verticals, educational institutions are a huge risk. As you mentioned, they have names, dates of birth, social security numbers, financial information as to how people make payments for their tuition. A lot of universities conduct critical research in medical fields and other fields necessary for the United States and really the rest of the world. So there's a lot of information that's out there. And unfortunately, typically those institutions don't invest a lot in cybersecurity. So there's huge risk there for them also.
Okay, but there's also, for instance, examples of I receive emails every day of saying something like, "Oh, you won $1 million or euros in my case. Click here," and then if you do that, they end up asking for your bank account number or uh, or things of the sort. How problematic is that as far as the human weakness?
Tom, you want to take that? You want me to jump into it?
Go ahead, Jerry. Yeah, I have some ideas, but please go ahead.
Yeah. So when you look at the human factor, Leonardo, with the advent of AI, those spearfish emails and compromise attempts are becoming much more sophisticated. It's not so easy to call out to identify the inappropriate grammar and sentence structure anymore because AI is making it very easy for the hackers to create those emails that they're trying to get people to click on. And then secondarily, the bad guys only have to be right once. The good guys, we need to get it right every single time. So that's why it's important that, along with anything else in cybersecurity, you utilize the defense in depth approach and you look at people, process, and technology. From the people standpoint, you want to have really good training. That's why I recommend, insider risk training is something you may want to do in person. Potentially bring in outside speakers to do it so they're not listening to the person they see every day at work, and they get a different perspective on it. And then you need to have people that manage the program from the inside. You need to have appropriate processes and technology in place also. The technology can look at, large uploads or downloads of data. You should have technical controls in place that prevent someone from sending 2 gigs of information from their work email to their Gmail account. Maybe you don't, on a regular basis, do business with the Far East in your company. So you should not have IPs from the Far East accessing your corporate network. And then you have the process piece. So you have the people piece, the training, and the people that manage the program. You have the technology in place, but the process is, are you looking at it and is it configured correctly? I had a company that had a world-class tool installed on their network. And when you got the tool for the same price, you could have configure it to block, or you can configure it to only alert. And unfortunately, this company configured it to only alert instead of alert and block until it got human interaction. And that was a multi-million-dollar mistake for this company because when the tool alerted at 3 a.m. and said, "Hey, I have a problem. Someone's doing something on the network. I need a human to look at me." Nobody was there to look at them, and it was a holiday weekend. And so you've got to have the appropriate processes in place to go along with the people and the technology.
We talked so far about. Go ahead. Sorry, Tom.
It's very, very the threat picture is getting more concerning every single day. Last week, I read a very concerning article about AI is now so powerful that it can replicate uh, the voice of a CEO, the security team leader, and a lot of celebrities, Joe Rogan et al., suffer from this routinely, and it only takes, I think the article said, uh, 6 to 7 minutes for AI to capture the nuances and the pronunciation and so forth of any one person. And so if the bad actor is sophisticated enough to harness AI in that regard, it's just it's we're really behind the power curve. I don't know how we're going to combat that except to have very good human training, one human standing in front of a crowd of employees and explaining the threat landscape, explaining how to counter it, explaining how to mitigate it, and so forth. So the today's technology aimed at taking or stealing IP is just very, very sophisticated, and the ace in the hole that us humans have is this human training and understanding for the workforce what it is they're up against.
So we talked about humans so far. Let's get to technology. What are the best practices that a company can put in place to prevent uh, data being stolen? I can think of password expiration, password complexity, things of the sort, but I guess there's much more. Do you guys want to elaborate?
Yeah, from a I can jump in here from a insider risk IP protection standpoint. You want to have DLP tools, data loss protection tools, and those are some things like I just mentioned where you can't send a large package, gigabytes of information or even terabytes of information to a personal email account. You would probably want that blocked. You can configure the DLP rules within a network. So you can configure emails that when you try to type in a date of birth or a social security number, it doesn't allow you to send that email because you're violating policy. And then it just automatically blocks when you try to send large amounts of data to domains, Gmail, Hotmail, whatever the personal email accounts are. Um, without appropriate approval, and it'll kick that over to a security person to review it. If you're trying to access areas of the world where you shouldn't be from your computer in, Indiana, you can configure that also. And then you can get into what they call UBA, user behavior analytics, and it can start to see things, even if it's not an overt act, like I'm trying to send an email to my Gmail account from my corporate account with 5 terabytes of data. If I do three things that are not specifically overt, those user behavior analytics are still going to kick me over to a security person to knock on my door and say, hey, why are you doing this? There may be legitimate reasons. Maybe the company asked the individual to do some research. Maybe they want to expand into, business operations in China, Taiwan, or Russia. But maybe they don't. Maybe that individual has been contacted by someone over there. So there are definitely tools that can help in this area that you want to employ. And that again goes along with what I talked about, people, process, technology. The tools come in on the technology end, but they need to be finely tuned so, your employees can still get their job done every day.
Right. They have a lot of software tools now that identify what we call anomalous behavior, and the tools are getting better and better. Jerry has recently worked with companies to employ those tools and put those tools in the system to identify behavior that's inconsistent or anomalous or alerting in some way. And a big part of that, of course, is the human piece of training your workforce to understand what anomalous behavior looks like in the workplace from 9 to 5 kind of thing.
Well,
Yeah.
guys, let me say that sometimes these automatic systems backfire because, for instance, a few days ago, I was trying to send an Excel file with some VBA code to a system integrator of mine, and that was totally legitimate because they had to test it, and I couldn't. It took me like forever to find a way to work around that security filter. I had like to rename it to PDF, to zip it, and to change the name. But being also an IT guy, I understand that there's no perfect system. So probably this is an annoyance we'll have to bear with to avoid worse scenarios. I don't know if you want to say something about this.
Yeah, that goes along with the tuning I talked about, Leonardo.
Yeah,
And then there's
yeah,
also something called role-based access control. So there may be individuals in the company that are, been there 10, 15 years that have more senior roles that maybe they need some separate permissions. Maybe this is something you do on a routine basis and you need to notify the security people that you're going to be sending these types of files. All of that goes into what I talked about, tuning the security tools that help protect the IP. So that's one thing you can do there. And the good part of that is it means the systems your company has employed are working. They're doing what they were intended to do. In the end, it's the tool itself is more of a dumb tool. It's told, hey, if you see this, then you do this.
yeah.
It doesn't know that you had a legitimate reason to do that, and so it's you get into the tuning of the tool and the response, and how quickly can security reach out to you, or you proactively reach out to them and say, hey, just to let you know, I have to send this type of file to a developer for this project I'm working on. And they document that, and then they know that an exception was granted.
Okay, we talked about the human factor. We talked about technology. Let's get to geopolitics. There are some areas in the world that are more exposed to this kind of threat because of low security, for instance?
Yeah, definitely. There's two as everybody knows, for example, if a lot of people do business in China, but when you do business in China, the Chinese government requires you reveal your source code to them. So you need to have extra precautions if you're not willing to reveal your source code to the government over there. And then on the other end of the spectrum, from technically advanced, geopolitics, whether it be you're doing business in Asia, you're doing business in Eastern Europe, Russia, for example. You have Africa, where in South America, where maybe the cybersecurity systems are not as advanced, so you're at risk there also, because there's not as many controls on the networks as there are in more developed countries. So I think there's a risk on both ends. Anything there, Tom, you want to jump in with?
No, I think that's 100% correct. We, as we deal with global companies as clients, we sometimes forget to remind them that they are most vulnerable in parts of the world that they sell things, whether it's appliances or heart pumps or whatever it is. They are more vulnerable in those parts of the world than they are in the U.S. And in my case, I forget to remind a global company sometimes that it's not just what it looks like in Chattanooga or Houston. It's what does it look like in Croatia or um, Jamaica or wherever you are have a plant or you have IT support. And so Jerry makes a very good point. And again, from my perspective, good IT proactive IT programs in place and investing in your workforce with respect to training is not a guarantee to avoid any uh, theft of valuable IP, but it's a hell of a good way to mitigate it.
Let me ask the other side of the coin of this question. We talked about at the beginning of this conversation, we talked about the fact that there are state-sponsored folks trying to steal intellectual property from others. I think the most common cases that would come to everybody's minds right now would be Russia, Iran, China, and North Korea. Of course, we see nothing of that in the United States or Italy. So does being in these countries even make it different somehow, or being close to this country can make it different somehow? Because I think that, for instance, countries close to Russia, don't know, Poland, Finland, or Ukraine, of course, should have more security than the others far away, or maybe are not directly threatened by these countries. Am I right or wrong?
I think everybody's at risk. I think, countries that are closer, they present more targets of opportunity to nation state hackers. But, we are most certainly not immune. There are, many, many cases of nation state hacking within the United States, stealing trade secrets from individuals. Even you look at the if you've heard of the ghost IT workers, where people from North Korea were getting jobs with companies within the United States, never having met anybody in person, and then funneling large amounts, millions of dollars, to the North Korean government from that. So nobody is really immune, but I do tend to agree with you that if you are on the border of, say, Russia and Poland, it probably creates more targets of opportunity for them than it would within the continental United States, but it doesn't make us immune to it. It just means they have to work a little bit harder to compromise someone and get into a company's network. But again, as I mentioned earlier, the hackers only have to be successful once. The company needs to be successful every single time in its defense.
Great point.
Guys, what do you see for the future of cybersecurity? Because the landscape has changed significantly in the last decades. For instance, I remember some 10 years ago, people saying that Hillary Clinton lost the elections because people stole her emails and published them on websites. And even today, we see that cybersecurity is a big part of Russia's warfare. What do you see coming in the next years?
Yeah, I think obviously AI is going to play a huge factor. The thing about AI has no allegiance. It can be your best friend or your worst enemy. But I think AI enhanced cybersecurity, where it is detecting um, uh, attempts to hack into a network. But then on the flip side of that, AI is, helping the hackers develop better emails and develop malware that can circumvent security tools. So I think AI is going to play a huge role. Automation in general is playing a huge role. Cybersecurity is a cost center. It doesn't make any money for the company, but it costs a lot of money. So people have to make those risk-based decisions. Is this, threat times vulnerability equals risk? So you could have a huge threat, but no vulnerability. Therefore, you have no risk. So are you going to accept the risk? Are you going to mitigate it through controls? Or are you going to transfer the risk through insurance? But I circle back to what we started off our conversation with, the human factor. Tom mentioned how AI can, within 6 minutes, mimic someone's language. And that's why it's important to have that in-person human training. Whereas part of it, maybe when the CEO does the introduction of the person that's doing the training, he says, I will never call you up and ask you to transfer money. It all comes down to training in the human factor and people knowing, hey, this looks a lot like my CEO on the computer screen. It sounds a lot like my CEO, but he told me don't ever transfer money without taking these 3 steps. And hopefully they'll go do those 3 steps. Call the CFO, call and verify the CEO, and call the bank and verify it. So I think as much as technology is advancing, I think you're going to see an increased reliance upon the human factor.
Anything you want to add,
Exactly
Tom?
right. That's 100% right. We in our ardor to perfect a stronger algorithm or a series of algorithms, even more intuitive AI, we sometimes forget that the most powerful tool of all is right in front of us, which is our workforce. And that workforce, if properly trained and empowered and motivated to keep valuable IP within the company, I think that's really something that too many companies are not paying significant enough attention to, and the training cost for that is minimal. It really is. Now the technical controls are expensive, but it's all part of the cost of doing business to begin with. And training your workforce is an essential part of that. And in my experience, which is now pretty lengthy, just not enough companies appreciate the risk that they have in front of them. And the ones that may are not sure exactly where to turn. So hopefully some of those folks will see this podcast and um, think about it in terms of how to protect their scarce resources, because you can't, once trust is lost, Leonardo. Let's talk about trust. Once that trust is lost, whether it's trust in the purchasers, the customers, trust of the marketplace, the stock market, but most importantly, when trust is lost with the very employees that you have, it's almost impossible to build that trust back up. And it only takes one time to lose it, and then everybody's futures are in jeopardy. They want that building to still be open for business at 9 o'clock on a bright, happy Monday. But if you lose your mojo in a series of intellectual properties that have been stolen or otherwise compromised, the building won't be open. It's pretty basic.
Guys, I think we reached the end of our conversation, and I think that your expertise gave a very good insight to my viewers about this problem that is often overlooked because people don't think about cybersecurity or are not aware enough. So I think that, as Tom was saying, whoever listens to this podcast can have now a better understanding of how bad and things serious are out there.
Thank you, Leonardo.
Yeah, thank you. Great to have the opportunity to chat with you.
Thanks for your time again, guys. And
Thanks so much.
Thanks everybody else for watching this. And I'll see you all in my next episode. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.